Sir. I would request Atul sir to please introduce our dignitaries on the dais.
Thank you very much. Welcome back, all. Today we are going to speak about responsible brands, corporate social responsibility and sustainability. These two subjects are interwoven, I think, and are most relevant in the times that we are living in now. Wrong to call it post-pandemic times because we are very much challenged even now. So we have got some of the best-known authors, columnists, and professors joining this session. In the first, I will start with Mr. Tamal Bandyopadhyay, noted journalist, financial journalist, and with a request that if he can please elaborate his thoughts about the corporate CSR part with the financial sector institutions.
Thank you. I mean, honestly, this is not my forte because I track financial sector. So yeah, is that okay, Mike? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So well, I mean, if you all of us know that the companies law, the change companies law, which is in vogue at this point of time, has made it mandatory and specified certain amount as a percentage of profit. It all depends on how much profit you are making, and it all depends on what is your turnover, to what extent you need to spend on social responsibility or corporate social responsibility. So companies, irrespective of, I mean, whether it's a financial sector or not, they have been spending. And if you look at particularly in the financial sector, I think most financial sector have particularly the banks, they have their own wings. I can think of whether you call it State Bank of India among the in the government owned banks, or on the other hand, say Axis Bank, it's a private bank. Offhand, it comes to this too, or even Kotak Mahindra Bank and all. So most of them have a corporate social responsibility wing, which they call foundation. Say Kotak has a foundation, or Axis Bank has a foundation, and in various ways they do serve the purpose of whether it's education or providing lunch in schools, etc., etc. But the larger issue which the banks also have been doing and spending money in that sense, that is in the space of financial literacy, which is extremely important at this point of time, because as you know that India is not exactly a way financially literate. Some years back, even the banking penetration, etc., was very poor. Thanks to this government initiative PMJDY, which is world's largest and the most ambitious financial inclusion program. I think started in August 2014, and that picked up crores and crores of new depositors. So to that extent, the reach and the coverage by the financial sector, which India was a laggard, has been taken care of, and it's slowly growing. I mean, earlier it was only deposits, and many of them are zero balance deposits. But thanks to COVID, I think now all this DBT, that's the government direct transfer, that money has gone there, and this crores of, I think, probably 43 or 44 odd crore new bank accounts that had been added, they have got the money, etc. That has taken care to some extent the financial coverage. But what needs to be taken care of is the financial illiteracy. People don't know what to do with your money. People don't know where to keep your money. People don't know how to get loan from the bank, so on and so forth. So there is a huge gap over there. And to the best of my understanding, formally and informally, when I say formally, when I talk about Axis Foundation or Kotak Bank's initiative or State Bank of India, so under that foundation and certain percentage of their profits and turnover, they are spending for education, for multiple other purposes. But apart from that, getting out of this traditional typical CSR activities, which is mandated by the Companies Act, on their own, the banks, the small finance banks, the microfinance, they have taken a massive drive, have been taking a massive drive to take financial literacy to the hinterland, to rural India, to the bottom of the pyramid. Basically, what to do your money, how to get bank deposit, how to make yourself eligible to get bank loan, how to use this money productively, so on and so forth. So both formally and informally, what we have seeing in the financial sector, the corporate social responsibility, I think all of them are aware, and they are aware not for, I don't think, as a sort of charity they are doing, because if unless this financial literacy happens, there will not be inclusive growth. And unless we have the inclusive growth, and a bank's balance sheet also cannot grow, they can't make money. So it's, in some sense, it's an integrated part. I mean, if you want to do well, if you want to do your business well, you need to take care of that. Now, do you do it under this corporate, so-called corporate social responsibility norm mandated by the Companies Act, or do you do it even beyond that on your own? Because at the end of the day, you yourself will get the benefit. So that's my preliminary remarks. It's happening, and it's very, very critical for inclusive growth.
Thank you. It certainly exists there, no doubt about it. But the question remains where they are just meeting the statutory obligation or they are looking beyond it. Your quick view on it.
No, that's what I'm saying. It is not. They are looking beyond it. They are looking beyond it in the sense. I think their realization has dawned on them, because also, we need to have a little larger perspective. If you look at the banking sector, and it was in a mess. In fact, my latest book, which you guys have given an award, kind enough and nice enough to to recognize that, was all about that banking mess. The banking mess was created because of banking sector's exposure to corporate India, to large exposure to corporate India, and the smart corporates who turned defaulters, who did not bring their money on the table. They even as equity, they used bank money both for debt and equity. Not all of them, but many of them. And bank was also obsessed with growth of balance sheet, and they created a mess. And now you see that banks have shifted from the corporate India to the retails. And then retail meaning what? You and me in Delhi and Mumbai, we get our loan, personal loan and other loans and all, but also going beyond that to the hinterland, that micro granular loans also they have started giving. Is it corporate social responsibility? Yes, it is, and it's beyond that. Now, till now, what was happening? The banks were doing, under the banking norm, 40% of your bank loans need to go to the so-called weaker section of the society. That was a compulsion. The banks never saw it as a profit-making proposition. Banks saw it as a compulsion. They, under the law, they are compelled to do this. And if you are not able to meet this 40% target, then you have to keep your money with certain bonds with NABARD and SIDBI, etc., where you don't get even manage the cost of your deposit. There's a negative carry for that. And so which was not good for your business, but you were compelled to do that. But now, because of the mess the corporate India created, banks have realized that they can't trust the corporates. They do not have the right kind of risk management to manage the corporates. They can always get outsmarted. So the other way, the have-nots, the people bottom of the pyramid, the traders, the shopkeepers, the vegetable vendors, the rickshaw pullers, the tailors, they need money. They need money, and banks can give them money and see it not as a compulsion, but making out of it, making profit out of it. So that's the change that has happened in the Indian banking sector. That portion was taken care of the non-banking financial companies, the MFIs, but now the banks also have gone there. Is it a corporate social responsibility? Technically not, but practically it is, because till now those guys, these people under the bottom of the pyramid, they were denied credit, but now they are getting credit, and for them cost of money is not important, because otherwise they used to get credit from the informal sources at a much higher cost. So as long as they have access to bank money, they don't mind paying little more than that. So they are getting the money and they are paying back, barring the whatever happened during the COVID period, unfortunate period, because then they had to close their shop, they have to close their business. That's a separate story. But the things, the way the banking sectors approach to the have-nots, to the bottom of the pyramid, to the people who are unbanked, has dramatically changed. Informally or formally, whatever you look at it, it's a question of how you look at it. But that's a sort of corporate social responsibility they are fulfilling, they have committed to do that. And I think that's the way forward, because if we want to take India to this next level of 5 trillion economy, inclusive growth is very critical. And there, the financial sector, I think, is ready to play a very critical role. Again, you can call it informally or formally, technically or non-technically, but I look at it this sort of corporate social responsibility that the banks are doing.
Would you also like to touch the base about sustainability, where some of the banks have introduced green banking and other concepts, majorly delivering on environmental front?
That's just happening. If you ask me, I mean, it will be exaggerated that Indian banking sector is well aware or well prepared. I don't think that's the case. The banks have had a very bad time, rough time. They got their bad loans bloated. They had massive problem. Between 2015, 16, 17, they had massive problem. They're just coming out of it. Had there been no COVID, the things would have been different. And so the first phase of bad loan recognition is over. Second phase is recovery that started, and then the COVID hit. But fortunately, I think all the banking system is getting out of it. And that about the green banking, what you are talking about, the responsibility of the sustainable development, and this climate change, etc. I think just they are just getting into it. Reserve Bank of India has flagged off. State Bank of India very recently floated some green bond. So it's just a fledgling attempt. It just started. I think we need to wait. But for the time being, inclusive growth, getting banking into the bottom of the pyramid, taking banking to the people who have not been covered by the bankers. I think that is happening. And finally, is this one of the offshoot of COVID, and the positive part of COVID is the digital disruption. So which was actually which would not have been possible so fast. And and I would say that because of COVID, the banks have taken strides. The banking system, not the entire financial system, the kind of leapfrogging on the digital space, which would have taken probably a decade, now happened just in a couple of years' time. So they are quick, they are smart, they are nimble-footed, and at minimum cost, they are able to reach out to the people in hinterland, which otherwise would not have been possible. So the last mile, the so-called last mile connectivity, which we have been harping on, I think the digital disruption, what we are seeing now, that has taken care of. So people are being covered by the system increasingly. And I think that's as I said, on the one hand, COVID had disrupted and made our life miserable. Many businesses had to shut, and all kind of things happened. But the biggest positive of the COVID is this: the COVID has introduced us to the digital world, and this is the way forward. And this digital path is helping in a big way. Call it inclusive growth, call it financial inclusion, or call it corporate social responsibility of the banking system.
Yes, right.
Thank you.
Very comprehensive. Thank you. A new normal is in offing for sure. Now I have great pleasure in inviting Gauri Dwivedi, who is a senior journalist and author. Gauri, for your quick comment on the main theme.
Okay. I'll take about 3-4 minutes. I just collected my thoughts. Okay. So you said quick comments. So, okay, fair enough. So I will not touch upon what Tamalji had said, which is an exhaustive overview of what the banking system's responsibility role is. But on the other aspects, which is the CSR and the brand consciousness, two aspects of it, and I'm going to talk about both of them. First is the CSR issue. As has been rightly pointed out, that the government mandates that every company needs to spend 2% of their profits, plow it back to ensure everybody becomes better. But what really, in my assessment, is the larger issue as far as CSR is concerned is that if big companies are spending 2% of their profits, why is it that visible on ground change seems to be missing? There could be some 2 or 3 basic questions that probably need greater alignment. First is, what constitutes CSR? What really do we mean when we say CSR? Does it mean that the garden overlooking managing director's house should have lilies and roses, and that maintaining that garden is also CSR? By the way, there are boards which do have that small little garden which says it is under CSR. So is that what is our definition of CSR? Or does it mean that actually ensuring that communities that are part of any company's life cycle or supply chain become better off? Does it actually mean that working class or artisans, whichever field you take, their lot improves? Does it mean that employees or workers in hazardous conditions, they get taken care of? What is our definition of CSR? Nobody knows, or at least there is lack of granular detail to ensure that companies invest where there is a requirement. That is my first thought. Second is, when we say corporate social responsibility, most companies end up putting their pet projects as CSR. There is a coal company, for instance, there is a coal company which needs to transport huge amount of coal through a particular road, which cannot take that much of load. So what does it do? It fixes that road. And then there's a big board that says fixed under corporate social responsibility. It's your pet project because it suits you. Ideally, the road should not have that much of coal being passed through it. It's not meant for that amount of coal being passed through it. If it is happening, if there's a board that's put up on it, and funds are being allocated from the CSR fund, it is not doing a service to the entire community. That's one example of how pet projects end up coming under CSR. Or for instance, again, these are examples that there are, let's say, important or influential people within a company's setup, and their personal hobbies, activities, interests somehow manage to get aligned in the CSR objectives of the company. Is that what we really want when we say corporate social responsibility? No, they are pet projects of somebody in the company, or some important people in the company. They somehow manage to find themselves in corporate social responsibility objectives, thereby diluting the larger purpose with which some of these laws have been envisaged. And the third and equally important aspect is, when you say CSR, the first impression one gets is a lot of, some amount of work that corporates are doing is real, tangible, and that stands out. But when we say CSR for companies in India, it's a broad canvas that we are talking about. And the impression one gets is a fair amount of time is spent in brand building and PR. Not all of it is actually leading to tangible benefits. Some amount of it is going to be PR, some amount of it is going into brand building, some amount of it is going into image creation, which may not really lead to on-ground, grassroots level change, which is what is desirable. For instance, every year drains get cleaned. Every year drains contracts get given. But every year rains come and we figure out that what happened to those drain contracts. It's not like those drain contractors did not work. They did, but just enough to get those pictures in the annual reports. Pretty much like that. It's not like 2% doesn't get spent. It gets spent every year. 2% of profits is a very large amount. For some of the larger companies, it ends up into hundreds of crores. For smaller companies also, it's a decently big amount. And if you calculate that over a 10-year period, it's a significant corpus that should be leading to change. But as I said, our perception of what we want in CSR will drive that change? Do we want empowerment? Do we want betterment of the larger ecosystem, or do we want promotion of companies' image building, which is important in some aspects, but it cannot be an all-consuming aspect of CSR? That's what I feel as far as some of the larger basics as far as corporate social responsibility is concerned in India. The second aspect of the conversation revolves around responsible brands. Now, there is an increasing propensity amongst very prominent brands in India to get into this competitive activism. Nobody wants brands to lecture. Everybody wants brands to just either empower or ensure that they are able to empower their ecosystem. For instance, we all know the examples that are going around, whether it's a Fab India or whether it's a Tanishq. Everybody knows those examples. That's collective activism. That's talking down to your consumer. That's telling your consumer, hey, you're coming and buying my product, but let me also tell you, this is how you need to figure out your specific ways of dealing with what is important to you in your personal life, which is your festivals or any of the other ways. That's not what is needed from a responsible brand. What is ideally needed is, if Fab India just sticks to figuring out how its textile workers are better off because of its association, I think that work is done. More than that, Fab India doesn't need to get into. I'm just giving an example because it's fresh in our memory. There are so many like that. And I think that is where responsible brands suddenly get into activism, which is not needed. Just like business needs to stick to business, brand managers need to stick to ensuring that their brands are promoted, but not get into the realm of activism, which is what is increasingly happening. And I think that's where I'll stop in terms of my opening comments, and then we can sort of take
Yeah.
this forward.
Thank you, Gauriji. Now I will invite Mr. Arun Kumar Tripathi, a senior journalist, someone really, really very senior, and an acclaimed author. Sir, we would like to know your perspective from agrarian point of view, how farmers have been thinking about all these issues of CSR and sustainability. Your take has to be a little different from how both the panelists have just delivered from corporate front.
No, I will speak on farmers as well as
Precisely.
corporate sector, their dialectics, future of farming community, and all these things. So all your questions will be covered when I will speak on the topic. So can I speak now?
Sure.
Okay. मैं चूंकि हिंदी पत्रकार हूं, इसलिए हिंदी में ही बोलूंगा, और थोड़ी बहुत आप लोगों के संगत में बैठ के अंग्रेजी बोल लेता हूं, और अंग्रेजी अखबारों में भी 4-5 साल काम किया है, पढ़ता उड़ता अंग्रेजी में हूं, तो कोई सी दिक्कत नहीं है। लेकिन हिंदी में मैं अपनी बात को कम्युनिकेट अच्छी तरह से कर सकता हूं। मैं मानता हूं कि अभी रीजनल लैंग्वेजेस पर एक सेशन भी था, जो है वो सतपथी जी का, तथागत सतपथी जी का। तो कुछ बातें जो कि स्पेसिफिकली जो है, चूंकि कारपोरेट सोशल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी की बात हुई है, और अभी जो 378 दिन का किसान आंदोलन चला है, उसके माध्यम से बहुत सारे सवाल जो कि हमारे जो है वो डिस्कोर्स में नहीं थे, हमारे मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया में नहीं थे, वो अचानक आकर के खड़े हो गए हैं। और वो सवाल बहुत सीरियस क्वेश्चंस हैं, जिसको कि हम वी कैन नॉट पुट देम अंडर द कारपेट। और ये जो भी सीरियस जर्नलिस्ट हैं वो सब जानते हैं, क्योंकि अभी जो है वो तमाल साहब एक तरह से फाइनेंशियल लिटरेसी की बात कर रहे थे, और हमको हमारे फाइनेंशियल सेक्टर में क्या हो रहा है, कारपोरेट सेक्टर में क्या हो रहा है, इसकी एक प्रॉपर लिटरेसी हमारे यहाँ होनी चाहिए, जिसकी कमी भी है। लेकिन मैं एक दूसरी बात कर रहा हूँ, और वो बात ये है कि जो एग्रेरियन क्राइसिस है, जो कृषि का जो संकट है, ये सिर्फ 3 कृषि कानूनों से आया हुआ संकट नहीं है, और ना 3 कृषि कानूनों को वापस लिए जाने से वो संकट खत्म हो जाएगा। इसलिए अगर कोई जर्नलिस्ट, अगर कोई यंग स्टूडेंट, अगर कोई प्रोफेसर इस गलतफहमी में है कि पार्लियामेंट से ये चीज़ें वापस ले ली गई और किसान जो है वो लौट गए हैं और ये क्राइसिस एग्रीकल्चर की रिजॉल्व हो गई, तो दैट्स नॉट द पोजीशन। ये होने वाला नहीं है। ये जो है वो जो भी एग्रेरियन क्राइसिस है वो एक सिविलाइजेशनल क्राइसिस है, और वो लंबे समय से चली आ रही है। वो कुछ वजहों से एक्सेंचुएट हुई है, और कई बार वो चीज़ें थोड़ी सी जो है वो एक तरह से कहना चाहिए कि मध्यम पड़ जाती हैं, ठंडी पड़ जाती हैं। और मैंने चूंकि इस किसान आंदोलन को एग्जॉस्टिवली कवर किया, उस पर कम से कम 1 दर्जन आर्टिकल्स लिखे हैं, और वाणी प्रकाशन की एक पुस्तक आ रही है, आज के प्रश्न श्रृंखला, जिसको कि एमिनेंट जर्नलिस्ट राजकिशोर एडिट किया करते थे, और उसमें आपके उड़िया के बहुत बड़े इंटेलेक्चुअल हुए हैं। उड़िया के नहीं, ही वाज ए नेशनल इंटेलेक्चुअल एंड ही वाज यंगेस्ट एमपी फ्रॉम बरगढ़, उड़ीसा, किशन पटनायक जी। और किशन पटनायक जी ने उड़िया में काफी कुछ लिटरेरी कंट्रीब्यूशन भी किया है। लेकिन सो फार एज पॉलिटिकल राइटिंग इज कंसर्न, सो फार एज पॉलिटिकल लेक्चर्स आर कंसर्न, ही इज वन ऑफ द एमिनेंट पब्लिक इंटेलेक्चुअल ऑफ इंडिया। और एक पब्लिक इंटेलेक्चुअल का जो रोल होता है, वो रोल ये होता है कि जब भी कोई एक तरह से एक कहना चाहिए कि इंटेलेक्चुअल क्राइसिस हो, जब भी किसी तरह के जो है वो चीजें सूझ ना रही हो, अंधेरा हो, लोग परेशान हो, तब वो टार्च बियरर की तरह से रोशनी दिखाता है और वो आगे ले जाता है। एंड ही प्लेड दैट रोल। किशन पटनायक during the crisis of Mandal, during the crisis of Mandal, during the crisis of liberalization, and if he would have been at present, he would have played a better role during the farmers movement। क्योंकि दिल्ली में जब 1988 में किसान आंदोलन हुआ टिकैत का, बहन सिंह टिकैत का, जो राकेश टिकैत के पिताजी थे, तो वो एक बड़ा आंदोलन था। और 80 का दशक जो है वो बहुत सारे किसान आंदोलनों का दशक रहा है अपने आप में जो है, चाहे वो शरद जोशी का शेतकरी आंदोलन हो महाराष्ट्र का, चाहे वो कर्नाटक का नंजुंद स्वामी का आंदोलन हो, चाहे वो वेस्टर्न यूपी का टिकैत का आंदोलन हो, और चाहे पंजाब और हरियाणा के तमाम आंदोलन हो। तो चूंकि मैंने कई फार्मर लीडर से भी इंटरव्यू किया, और दर्शन पाल से भी, और जो है वो राजेवाल जी से भी, और भी कई लोगों से, तो जो भी चीज निकल करके जो आ रही है, और वो ये आ रही है कि ये सवाल जो है कि किसान रहेगा या नहीं रहेगा और किस रूप में रहेगा। क्योंकि किसानों का जो सवाल है वो इकोनॉमिक क्वेश्चन भी है, टेक्नोलॉजिकल क्वेश्चन भी है, सोशियोलॉजिकल क्वेश्चन भी है, एंथ्रोपोलॉजिकल क्वेश्चन भी है, और पॉलिटिकल क्वेश्चन भी है। I'm just referring you a book by Theodore Shemin, the famous British sociologist, Peasant and the Peasant Societies, और उनकी एक और किताब है डिफाइनिंग पीजेंट्स करके। पीजेंट एंड पीजेंट सोसाइटीज बहुत मशहूर किताब है, 80s में आई थी, और मुझे लगता है कि किसान समस्या पर पढ़ने लिखने वाले लोगों को थोड़ा बहुत उस किताब को देखना चाहिए। और वो किताब जो बात कहती है, जो बात धीरे धीरे प्रमाणित हो रही है, कि किसानों को ना तो जो है वो कैपिटलिज्म रखना चाहता है और ना ही कम्युनिज्म रखना चाहता है। ये दोनों सिस्टम की अपनी अपनी क्राइसिस है। फार्मर्स क्वेश्चन को पूरी तरह से कैपिटलिज्म भी नहीं रिजॉल्व कर सकता और कम्युनिज्म भी नहीं रिजॉल्व कर सकता। ये दो क्राइसिस सामने सामने आई है। दोनों किसानों के इश्यूज को थोड़े लेवल तक एड्रेस कर सकते हैं। कहीं कारपोरेट सोशल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी आ गई, कहीं किसानों के कंधे पर रख करके सोशलिस्ट रिवोल्यूशन हो गई, लेकिन अल्टीमेट लेनिन ने किसानों को के महत्व को महसूस किया, लेकिन स्टालिन ने उन किसानों को मरवा दिया जो किसान जो है वो कलेक्टिव फार्मिंग के लिए तैयार नहीं थे, और ऐसे किसानों की संख्या एक दो नहीं लाखों की संख्या में है। और माओ त्से तुंग के जो है वो कल्चरल रिवोल्यूशन में भी बहुत सारे किसान मारे गए और वहां पे फेमीन आया और बहुत सारी चीजें हुई। तो हम जिस सिचुएशन में जी रहे हैं उस सिचुएशन में ये बड़ा सवाल है कि जिस तरह से हमारी टेक्नोलॉजिकल सिविलाइजेशन आगे जा रही है, जिस तरह से हमारी जो है कैपिटलिज्म की जो है जो सिविलाइजेशन है वो आगे जा रही है, और जिस रूप में जो है युवाल नोआ हरारी देखता है कि 2142 में जो है वो होमो सेपियंस नहीं रहेगा, होमो डियस हो जाएगा। आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस जिस तरह से जा रही है, ऐसी सिचुएशंस में फार्मर्स कैसे रहेंगे, क्या करेंगे? क्योंकि फार्मर्स आर ट्राइबल्स बेसिकली। वो एक तरह से जो है बैकवर्ड सोशल कैटेगरी है जो कि एग्जिस्ट करती है, और हम लोग बड़े शहरों में रहते हुए, तमाम जो है वो डिजिटल वर्ल्ड में रहते हुए, वर्चुअल वर्ल्ड में रहते हुए, कारपोरेट वर्ल्ड में रहते हुए, हम भूल गए थे कि ऐसी भी कोई कम्युनिटी एग्जिस्ट करती है इस कंट्री में, और अचानक ही आकर के दिल्ली को घेर लेगी और कुछ गजब कर जाएगी। और गजब कर गई वो कम्युनिटी इस तरह से जो है किसान क्या है क्या नहीं है। इसलिए किसानों को समझना ये कारपोरेट सोशल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी भी है, ये डेमोक्रेटिक गवर्नमेंट की भी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, ये जर्नलिस्ट की भी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, एक स्टूडेंट की भी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, पॉलिटिकल क्लास की भी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है। किसान जब बॉर्डर से जाने लगे, आज संभवतः गए जा रहे होंगे, उनका जो है वो धरना उठ रहा होगा, तो वो कह रहे हैं कि हम एक चीज लेकर के जा रहे हैं, सिर्फ हम किसान बिलों की वापसी नहीं लेकर के जा रहे हैं, बड़ी जीत लेकर के जा रहे हैं, ये एक अलग बात है। लेकिन हमने जो है वो एसकेएम बनाया है, संयुक्त किसान मोर्चा बनाया है। और ये बात मुझसे दर्शन पाल ने भी इंटरव्यू में कही कि इसके पहले 80s और 70s के डिकेड में, 90s के डिकेड में जो फार्मर्स मूवमेंट होते थे वो ज्वाइंट नहीं हो पाते थे, वो एकजुट नहीं हो पाते थे। कलेक्टिव लीडरशिप पहली बार किसानों की इमर्ज करके देश में आई है। उसके पहले पर्सनल लीडरशिप बोट क्लब पर हम लोगों ने कवर करते हुए महेंद्र सिंह टिकैत और शरद जोशी के लोगों के बीच में मारपीट देखी है। बोट क्लब की रैली पर दो बड़े किसान नेता एक दूसरे से टकरा गए और उनका इंटरेस्ट अलग अलग हो गया। किशन पटनायक जो है वो, जो कि जिन्होंने बहुत अच्छा इस विषय पर लिखा है, एक उनकी बहुत अच्छी किताब है, इसको आप लोग कहीं मिले तो जरूर पढ़िएगा। या ईश्वरी प्रसाद जी ने जो है भारत में किसान आंदोलन करके किताब एडिट किया है, जिसमें सच्चिदानंद सिन्हा के भी लेख हैं, किशन पटनायक के भी लेख हैं। तो एक किसान की जो कैटेगरी है वो कहाँ तक जाएगी और कहाँ तक रहेगी, ये एक सिविलाइजेशनल क्वेश्चन है जो यहाँ पर हम लोगों को थोड़े बहुत समय में, ज़्यादा समय नहीं है क्योंकि मुझे मेरी करीब जो है मैं 10 मिनट से ज़्यादा बात रख भी नहीं सकता, मुझे भी भागना है और ये सेशन भी बहुत देर से शुरू हुआ है। लेकिन मैं जो चीज़ छोड़े जा रहा हूँ, जो सवाल छोड़े जा रहा हूँ कि ये वर्ल्ड बैंक ने भी अपने डॉक्यूमेंट्स में ये बातें कही हैं कि दुनिया की 7 अरब आबादी है, उस 7 अरब आबादी में कम से कम 5 अरब किसान हैं। उस 5 अरब में से हमको उनकी तादाद को घटा करके 1 अरब लाना है, 1 अरब से भी कम लाना है। इतने बड़े सेक्शन ऑफ पॉपुलेशन को आप एक जो है वो प्रोफेशन या ऑक्यूपेशन से शिफ्ट करेंगे, उस दौरान क्या क्या चीजें होंगी ये सब आप जो है इमेजिन कर सकते हैं। उस दौरान सुसाइड्स होंगे, उस दौरान माइग्रेशन होगा, उस दौरान जो है लोग बेरोजगार होंगे, उस दौरान लोगों को तमाम बीमारियां होंगी, बहुत सारी चीजें होंगी जो कि आप जिसको फार्मर कम्युनिटी के रूप में आप देख सकते हैं। तो इतने बड़े पॉपुलेशन को हम जो है नॉन फार्मिंग कम्युनिटी में शिफ्ट करने की जो जिम्मेदारी है वो है। डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज की बात अलग है। डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज में जो पीजेंट कम्युनिटीज है वो 1% 2% के आसपास हैं और फिर भी वो हैवी सब्सिडी देते हैं। मैं ये नहीं कह रहा हूं कि सिर्फ भारत में कृषि सेक्टर क्राइसिस में है, पूरी दुनिया में एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर क्राइसिस में है इन कंपैरिजन टू इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर। और वो क्राइसिस जो है वो उसको किसी तरह से जो है आप कहना चाहिए कि सब्सिडी दे करके और किसी तरह से मैनेज किया जा रहा है। और भारत में चूंकि उस पर निर्भर आबादी की संख्या बहुत ज्यादा है, अभी भी जो है वो 50% आबादी कम से कम एग्रीकल्चर पर डिपेंड करती है। उसमें एग्रीकल्चर पर डिपेंड करने वालों में बड़े खेतिहर किसान भी हैं, मझोले भी हैं, सीमांत भी हैं और एग्रेरियन लेबर्स भी हैं। और एग्रेरियन लेबर्स ने भी इस आंदोलन में पार्टिसिपेट किया है। जो पंजाब के तमाम दलित आंदोलन के लोगों ने पार्टिसिपेट किया है। मैं पर्सनली मैंने कई लोगों का इंटरव्यू लिया, नवदीप वगैरह और ऐसे लोगों ने भी पार्टिसिपेट किया। तो ये जो किसान के सवाल, एग्रीकल्चर के क्राइसिस के सवाल को पहली बार देश में खासकर 21st सेंचुरी में इतनी बड़ी कम्युनिटी ने रियलाइज किया है और उसको रेज करने का काम किया है। मैं एक दूसरी बात यहाँ पे जोड़ना चाहता हूँ कि 5 मिनट से ज्यादा आप घबराइए नहीं, मुझे जाना भी है।
घबराने की तो कोई बात ही नहीं। दरअसल you have set a grand narrative and we are well aware about your work and extensive
Let me
thought.
finish.
Just to give it a good turn, would like to know what are the expectations these farmers have?
जी, किसानों की ये पूछ रहे हैं कि किसानों की उम्मीदें क्या हैं। किसानों की उम्मीदें जो है वो मैंने दर्शन पाल से बातचीत की तो उनका ये कहना था, और एंड ही वाज द मोस्ट इंटेलेक्चुअल लीडर ऑफ दिस फार्मर्स मूवमेंट, संयुक्त किसान मोर्चा के, एंड ही इज he has more deep understanding and practical experience with the farmers movement than Yogendra Yadav, than other persons, than so many persons. उन्होंने एक दो बातें कही कि एक तो हम लोग जब चले थे तो हम लोग 3 कृषि कानूनों को वापस कराने की लड़ाई लेकर के चले थे। इससे ज्यादा हमारे पास जो है वो कोई उम्मीद नहीं थी। उग्राहा से जो मेरी बात हुई, जोगिंदर सिंह उग्राहा से, उनका कहना था कि हम डेमोक्रेसी के सवाल को लेकर के चले थे और हम उसको हल करके जाएंगे। 19 तारीख को मोदी जी का ऐलान होता है। करीब 12 तारीख को मैंने जो इंटरव्यू लिया उसमें ही वॉज कॉन्फिडेंट। उनका कहना था कि सरकार ये किसान बिल वापस लेगी और अगर नहीं लेगी तो सरकार का जो ग्राफ है वो धीरे धीरे नीचे जाएगा। यानी 2 चीजें निकल रही थी। एक तो जो 3 कानून लाए गए थे वो कारपोरेट के इंटरेस्ट को सर्व करने के लिए लाए गए थे, नॉट टू सर्व द इंटरेस्ट ऑफ फार्मर्स। इस देश के किसानों ने कारपोरेट मीडिया के सारे प्रचार और सारी बदनामियों के बावजूद they came to realize and they forced government to realize that is the fact that these legislations have not been passed for the sake of farmers, that have been passed, they have been passed for the sake of corporate. और ये सरकार ने भले अपने बयानों में तमाम तरह के जो है वो कतरब्योत किए हैं, लेकिन महसूस करना, वापस लेना कोई छोटी घटना नहीं है इंडियन लेजिस्लेटिव हिस्ट्री में, इंडियन डेमोक्रेसी की हिस्ट्री में। तो दरअसल जो है ये क्राइसिस ये है कि ग्रेजुअली जो एग्रीकल्चर का जो इनपुट है वो इनपुट बढ़ता जा रहा है और एग्रीकल्चर से जो रिटर्न है वो आ नहीं रहा है लोगों को। और वो एमएसपी की गारंटी के बाद आएगा या एक मिनिमम इनकम की गारंटी के बाद आएगा, वो कोई बात बहुत अभी सर्टेनिटी के साथ कही नहीं जा सकती। लेकिन 3 कानून एक ब्लो थे जिसको उन्होंने अपने ऊपर से हटाया है। मैं एक दूसरी बात यहाँ ऐड करना चाह रहा हूँ और वो बात थोड़ी मेरे ऑब्जर्वेशन में ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है। वो इंपॉर्टेंट ये है कि तमाम लोग ये महसूस कर रहे थे, जो वर्ड प्रेस फ्रीडम है, जो दुनिया भर के डेमोक्रेटिक इंडेक्स नापने वाले, कि भारत में डेमोक्रेसी क्राइसिस में है। लेकिन सबसे बड़ी बात इमर्ज करके आई है कि उस डेमोक्रेसी को बचाने के लिए जो मॉडर्न डेमोक्रेटिक इंस्टीट्यूशंस हैं वो इनकैपेबल प्रूव हो रहे थे। ना तो लेजिस्लेचर, ना जुडिशियरी, ना एग्जीक्यूटिव, ना मीडिया। फिर उनको बचाने के लिए मेडिवल पीरियड के इंस्टीट्यूशंस निकल करके आए हैं जिन्होंने आपको डेमोक्रेसी को सेव किया है। और उसमें सिख जत्थेबंदियां थी, उसमें जाटों की खाप पंचायतें थी, जिनको आप फ्यूडल और मेडिवल पीरियड के इंस्टीट्यूशंस कहते हैं, और है भी उनमें बहुत सारी चीजें। और ये बात किसान आंदोलन के नेताओं ने भी मानी कि निश्चित तौर पे उसमें एक्सट्रीमिस्ट एलिमेंट थे, फ्रिंज एलिमेंट थे और उनकी एक्टिविटीज भी हुई। और जैसे कि सारी सिख जत्थेबंदियां आंदोलन में आई तो उसमें बहुत सारे लोग थे और लाल किले की घटना में वो सारी चीजें हुई, लेकिन उन्होंने उसको कंट्रोल किया और एक ज्वाइंट लीडरशिप प्रोवाइड की और एक संयुक्त किसान मोर्चा दिया और किसानों के इशू को नेशनल प्लेन पर नहीं की बल्कि इंटरनेशनल प्लेन पर रेज किया है। और ये जो भारत का किसान आंदोलन है ये फार्मर्स इशू को, इंडियन फार्मर्स की डिफिनीशन को पूरी दुनिया के लेवल पे एक रीडिफाइन करने की कोशिश करेगा, नया डिस्कोर्स खड़ा करेगा। मैं एक लाइन के साथ अपनी बात खत्म करूंगा। मेरे एक मित्र हैं, इस दौरान बहुत सारी कविताएं और कहानियां लिखी गई हैं तमाल साहब, और उसकी किताब को एडिट कर रहे हैं। शायद जो है वो पहली बार हिंदी में, मेरे ख्याल से अन्य भाषाओं में भी लिखी गई होंगी, पंजाबी में भी लिखी गई होंगी। एक बहुत वॉल्यूमिनस राइटिंग हुई है और जिसने बहुत सारे जो है वो सेंसिटिव लोगों को इंस्पायर किया है। तो ये सवाल जो है सिर्फ बदनाम करने से कि ये आतंकवादी हैं और ये गुंडे हैं और किसानों के पास ट्रैक्टर नहीं होता और ये अच्छे कपड़े नहीं पहन सकते, ये जो इमेजेस बिल्ड की गई थी उस सब इमेजेस को जो है एक मेडिवल पीरियड के कुछ इंस्टीट्यूशंस ने शैटर किया है। वो कहाँ तक जाएगा मैं नहीं कह सकता, लेकिन फार्मर्स कम्युनिटी की अपनी क्राइसिस है और जो एंथ्रोपोलॉजिकल क्राइसिस है, सोशियोलॉजिकल क्राइसिस है। अंत में मैं इतनी बात कहूंगा कि कुछ क्लाइमेटिक जो क्राइसिस है, किसान उस सवालों को भी एड्रेस करेंगे देर सबेर। और वो सवाल जो है वो इस तरह से है कि जेसी कुमारप्पा जो गांधी के बहुत महत्वपूर्ण शिष्य थे, इकोनॉमिस्ट थे, उनकी एक किताब है इकोनॉमी ऑफ परमानेंस। आप लोग, पतली सी किताब है, मेरे ख्याल से विद्यार्थियों को भी पढ़ना चाहिए कि किस तरह से जो एग्रेरियन इकोनॉमी है, वो एग्रेरियन इकोनॉमी एक नॉन वायलेंट इकोनॉमी, जस्ट
No, I will stop
जस्ट
you
मिनट, वो
because you are
नॉन वायलेंट
diverting-
इकोनॉमी है और वो एक
diverting from-
परमानेंट स्ट्रक्चर दे सकती है। तो बहुत सारी चीजें आई हैं, आप लोग इसको
No, no,
देख
we
लीजिए।
just want to know your quick view on one point only. How corporate is linked to the whole crisis? Do you think the corporate is behind this crisis or?
Exactly, that farmers raised the issue that whole corporate is behind the crisis. The role corporate media was playing is written on the wall. The three bills were meant to serve the interest of corporate, that is written on the wall. Nothing is hidden, and there is clash between corporate and the backward community and the backward society and the backward economy.
What solution?
How you have to reconcile? The solution is in reconciliation. Solution is not in the extremes. Solution is the synthesis. Corporate have to be sensitive towards the backward economy, backward community, and the backward community have to be sensitive towards the development of technology, development of capital, and modernity of the society.
Thank you very much. Tamal, would you like to come back on this? Linking the aspiration.
No, I-
CSR and such.
No, I just want to say one very brief. I don't have any knowledge, I mean, any expertise to talk on this, but you have seen the latest report and all. Now everybody is talking about two Indias. I'm not talking about India from 1947 and India from 2014, not the political issue. I'm talking about India and Bharat. So over a period of time and all the latest reports, if you go by Niti Aayog's report, and if you go by some of the other global organizations reporting this, the difference between India and Bharat has been widening, and particularly after the COVID. So the rich is, I mean, it's a cliche to say that the rich is getting richer and the poor is becoming poorer. So the dividing line and or the divide between India and Bharat is got widened. So it's not the corporate social responsibility. I think it is our responsibility, your responsibility, my responsibility, her responsibility, everybody else's responsibility to look at this and some kind of soul searching and what can we do. And if you look at the way the corporate profitability, again, I'm not making any political statement, neither I'm a capitalist or anti-capitalist, nothing like that. But if you have seen the way the corporate profitability, even after the COVID period, how they have gone up tremendously because of the cost cutting and because of so many multiple other things. If you look at the richest Indians, how they have become even richer. And if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, how they are, be they Kishan or be they tailors or be they sabji vendors or be they rickshaw pullers, I'm not identifying what community do they belong to, what work they do to. I'm just talking about the wider Bharat. So in this context, the so-called CSR, which is identified by the Companies Act and the government, is extremely important. I think what this lady spoke about, how they actually circumventing the rule and using the money only to build their brand. I mean, that's actually a charitable way of looking at it. There are also a lot of fund diversion. In fact, there are reports how they are actually using the money not for the purpose which they are meant to be. So that's a separate story. So corporate social responsibility is very, very critical. But more importantly, I think it is everybody else's responsibility. Those who are holding seminars in 5-star hotels and in the AC air conditioned atmosphere. I think somebody spoke about this 24-48 formula. You and me and all, we are all in this 24 temperature, we are having armchair discussion. But we need to focus those who actually work under the scorching sun, 48-degree temperature. So this, we need to that we, the 24 people, need to take cognizance of this 48 segment, and we need to do that. And that's corporate India. Yes, corporate India needs to, but beyond that, I think each and all of us, particularly after the COVID, as the divide between India and Bharat gets widened, I think it is all of us responsibility. How do we reach out and how do we help them to to lift their quality of life. That's very, very critical. I mean, the banking system needs to do this. The corporate India needs to do this. You, me, everybody else. I think the only way forward is inclusive growth. I am not making a political statement. It just, I mean, we can't afford to have this gap between India and Bharat getting widened. We need to go for inclusive growth, which is why it's at this point of time, the corporate social responsibility is extremely, extremely critical.
That's the minimum
Thank
we
you.
can ask for.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Tamal. Gauriji, what's your view on bridging this gap between Bharat and India?
Uh, it's interesting that what Tamalji pointed out, the fact that sure, sure, the fact that Ji, the fact that how do you bridge the inequalities as far as the haves and the have-nots is concerned. You know, there is another view to it, which is that not all of the bridging the inequality responsibility lies on the corporates. They are doing their job, which is that I create growth, I create jobs, I pay corporate taxes. Beyond that, how much more can I shoulder? That is a very popular and at some level not a completely illegitimate view of companies as well. They say that primarily I am supposed to ensure jobs. And beyond that, some of the responsibility lies with the government as well. I am going the extra mile now that you've asked me to pay 2% of my profits as corporate social responsibility. But beyond that, how much more can I shoulder? And as I said, there is valid argument and there's merit in that argument also, simply because around the world we have seen that how economies have prospered and how benefits have trickled down. To turn the wheel upside down or to turn the cart upside down is also not very ideal scenario. That's a very important aspect of understanding how do we bridge the inequalities. And compounding matters is that when you talk about CSR funds being diverted, we all know the funds are diverted in all sorts of objectives and all sorts of work. But if the government starts having penal provisions on this, then also there will be a backlash, because then companies will turn around and say, not only are you making me pay out of my pockets, now you're going to come back and charge me with penal provisions if there is a problem with funds not being done properly. And that will create a very negative environment and sentiment as far as companies and large corporates are concerned. So it is not a simple solution when you talk about what is it that the corporate sector can do. And so to sum it up, the argument that you have to respect the wealth creators also comes back to just this, that if I'm creating wealth, I am fulfilling my primary responsibility. I can go the extra mile, but I can't be penalized if I'm not doing so.
Thank you very much, Gauriji. As we are running short of time, so we have to wind it up. It's always useful to continue the discussion like this. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you, audience. Thank you. Thank you.